If Catherine's watching this, she knows that I always want to throw extra articles.
And sometimes just incorrect words entirely. But
Empire of Light.
that is correct.
Sam Mendes is back directing, and we talked about this this week, Thomas. He's incredibly versatile. I mean, you look at his body of work. I mean, he did American Beauty, and then you look at Skyfall, and then you look at 1917. And if you didn't know it was Mendes, you would say, who's directing this? Because they all feel so different. Same way with Empire of Light.
Yeah, and really the only through line through each of these films is some of his collaborators. You got Roger Deakins returning as the cinematographer, Lee Smith as the editor. But otherwise, if you put this film up against, Skyfall or Spectre and just showed them back to back to somebody who had no idea what Sam Mendes directing, they'd probably, once the credits roll, be like, hold up, there's no way that's the same guy who directed those
Exactly.
movies. And then, after that, put on 1917 for him and be like, hey, still the same guy. So It's truly impressive, his versatility as a storyteller.
Yeah, and to me, that's phenomenal talent, because there are some acting talents and some directors that they've got a particular form, a particular style, a particular genre, and they will stick to it and stick to it and stick to it. And there's nothing wrong with that. They may be amazing at it, but they don't go beyond and spread into different ways. But Mendes does, and in this film, it takes us back to the early 1980s, between 1979, 81, that time period, a coastal town in the UK, and there's a community movie theater called the Empire. That's where the name comes from, and the characters we get to know are all somehow connected to those relationships that we find in this. Acting in this, you've got Olivia Coleman, you mentioned Toby Jones, actually before we went on the air, and Colin Firth. And I tell you, Michael Ward is amazing in this film.
Yeah, Michael Ward, his character in this film is just truly a kind-hearted gentleman. He cares about people and has so much compassion. And some characters in this film are kind of scummy characters, individuals that you don't want to spend any time with at all. But him, anytime he's on screen, he just has such a warmth about him, and it just kind of radiates through the audience.
Yeah, and when you see Coleman and Ward together, especially in their scenes where there's the rich dialogue, and sometimes even when you just see them making eye contact, the chemistry is just absolutely beautiful. The film itself, from a story standpoint, it looks at fragile relationships, the abuse of power, racism, mental health challenges, and really unlikely human connections.
Yeah, and you mentioned Olivia Coleman. She plays this character who is burdened with so much sadness and inner turmoil, and it's not always apparent that that's going to erupt to the surface, but when it does, she gets some brilliant moments of acting, and we've seen her grow into such a phenomenal performer over the years. Going back a few years ago to when she won her Oscar for The Favorite, and I think she's one of those. Ever since then, you and I, whenever she's attached to a project, we definitely know we got to seek it out.
Yeah, and she is phenomenal in this film. One of the year's best performances. I mean, if you're going to look in the top 10 performances from a female this year, I mean, I think she would definitely be in there. Mentioned Colin Firth and Toby Jones also, and I think they have some interesting scenes. But honestly, this film is a platform for Coleman and for Ward.
That's right, and also for Roger Deakins. And we were sitting there in the opening credits of the film. I just said, Roger Deakins is one of the few cinematographers who can make something as simple as a half-empty coffee cup and a smoking ashtray in a dimly lit room still look beautiful.
Yes.
And so we were watching that, and it was almost as if on cue, right as I said that, it says cinematography by Roger Deakins over that very shot that I was talking about. So yeah, there's he's one of the greatest to ever do it. There's not really any more I can say as far as that's concerned, but it's once again some hypnotic photography from Deakins.
Deakins is absolutely perfect at bringing beauty into visual storytelling, and he does it no matter what the film is, and he does it here, like you said. Before we ever get into the story, we're seeing him set up things with scenes, and man, it was just like, wow, this is just, there's no dialogue, there's just these visuals, there's a score that we're hearing by
Reznor and Ross.
Yeah, Reznor and Ross. The film score was absolutely beautiful as well. And having that against the backdrop of what we're seeing visually with Roger Deakins, man, I was really blown away by the individual achievements that we had with the score, with the cinematography, and the performance.
Yeah, I do feel like as a whole there is something missing from the film, and there are thematically there are moments where we spend maybe 15-20 minutes exploring this idea, but then in the next sequence of scenes, we shift over to exploring another idea. And I think by the time the film wraps, there isn't exactly a coherent, tapestry with all these ideas they explore. And I do think that kind of impacted my overall feeling of the film. But just generally, it is still, very well crafted and great performances, and it's I think ultimately it's a very quiet character drama, and something that you kind of sit with while you're watching it, but also sit with and think about it for a few days later as well.
Yeah, it was a solid film, but I'm with you, and that's one of the things I mentioned in my review. The individual achievements were really phenomenal, but the story, I really felt like, because the story struggled to kind of find its way, that sometimes overshadowed the really powerful things about film. Not always. I mean, like I said, there were moments, but you and I both are very story driven. We're drawn to strong stories. That's that foundation. This one I found myself asking, like you said, what was the main theme, the main driving force? Was it about society in the early 80s in the UK? Was it a relationship drama? Was it misunderstanding that happens because of mental illness? Or was it about the beauty and power of cinema and showing cinema in this incredible movie theater? Because to me, that was one of the things that I thought we were going to see in that, and we did see elements of it. There's some beautiful moments that happen in a projector room where Toby Jones, who is the projectionist, is talking about, here's the projector, and he's explaining the process, and some of those things were, wow, that's, for movie lovers, drawn to that. But it just kind of, it was like a lot of things being thrown out there, trying to figure out what is it we're trying to really tell with the story.
Yeah, and if you saw the trailer, or you mentioned the Toby Jones monologue, when it plays in the context of the film, it does play in a very moving fashion, and it's basically a monologue about the science of film and the way our brains process the images. And I'd never actually heard it explained like that before, so that was really cool to see it articulated in a film.
Yep. But the film as a whole, it did suffer. I think it really failed to kind of find its footing and find its foundation, but I'm still glad that I got a chance to see it because of the performances and the other things we mentioned.
Absolutely. I think ultimately I'm going to settle with a solid B- for it, but I would still recommend for fans of filmmaking and fans of excellent performances.
Yeah, and I'm right there. I was struggling between the B- and the B, but I'm going to settle on a B just because of the technical achievements of what I saw, even though that narrative really didn't bring it to me. We're going to take...
It's called the Phi phenomenon. Viewing static images rapidly in succession creates an illusion of motion. Illusion of life.
And here's the coming home.